Was Alexander the Great gay? That's his one question I kept asking myself as a kid. Well, the dude who conquered half the planet by 30, built an empire stretching from Greece to India, worshipped as a god, and is a total war genius, might have been head over heels in love with his best friend. So is history's greatest conqueror also history's greatest simp? Let's talk about it. Before we jump into the story, if you enjoy my videos, please consider subscribing to my channel. It's always very much appreciated. Now, let's get into it. Imagine being born into chaos. It's 356 BCE, and the Palace of Pella, an ancient city located in central Macedonia, echoes with the cries of a newborn prince, Alexander. His father, Philip II, is a warrior king who's uniting Greece through blood and strategy. His mother, Olympias, is passionate, ambitious, and rumored to speak to snakes in sacred rituals. Alexander grows up in a court of paranoia and prophecy. From childhood, he's told he descends from Achilles and Hercules. That greatness isn't just possible, it's inevitable. Under the mentorship of Aristotle, he learns philosophy, science, and the art of war, preparing him for a destiny no one can imagine. Now, the year is 336 BCE. The halls of Pella echo with panic. King Philip II has been assassinated. In the chaos, all eyes turn to his 20-year-old son, Alexander. Nobody expects him to survive. Macedon is surrounded by enemies. Rebellions are breaking out across Greece, and the mighty Persian Empire, their enemy, watches and waits for Alexander's fate to be the same as his father's. But Alexander doesn't flinch. Within months, he crushes every rebellion, marching through cities that dared defy him, burning Thebes, a great city, to the ground as a warning. The message is clear. This young king is not to be underestimated. Then he sets his sights on something no one dared to dream of. Yep, Persia itself, an empire stretching from modern Turkey to India. Richer, larger, and more powerful than anything Greece has ever faced. Alexander crosses the Hellespont, modern-day Turkey, and begins his campaign with a symbolic gesture. He throws a spear into Persian soil, claiming the land as his own by divine right, and over the next few years, he fights a series of battles that will make him legendary. In one of his battles, Alexander confronts an army 5 times larger than his own. Through precision, speed, and audacity, he breaks Persian lines and topples the greatest empire the world had ever known. But it's not just military brilliance. Alexander is rewriting what kingship means. Instead of coming back home with the treasure of his conquests, he adopts Persian customs, marries into local royalty, and encourages his men to do the same, uniting East and West under his rule. By the time he's 25, Alexander controls all of Persia. By 30, he has marched to India, fighting war elephants at Hydaspes River and standing at the very edge of the known world. His men, exhausted after years of endless war, finally refuse to march further. Alexander has done the impossible. He's created the largest empire the world has ever seen, all before most people today would finish grad school. And yet, amid this breathtaking rise, a quieter story unfolds. The one person who's always by his side. Hephaestion. To understand Alexander's sexuality, we need to step out of our modern mindset and into the world of ancient Greece. Because in Alexander's time, love didn't come with neat boxes like gay or straight. Ancient Greek culture had a very different view of relationships. You've probably heard of it. Marriage? That was about politics, alliances, heirs, family honor. Love was rarely the priority. But affection, passion, that could happen outside marriage, sometimes with women, sometimes with men. Among the aristocracy, bonds between male companions weren't just accepted, they were celebrated. In fact, they were often seen as the highest form of loyalty, warriors bound not just by duty, but by love. This cultural lens is crucial because without it, Alexander's relationship with Hephaestion is impossible to understand. Ancient writers never felt the need to explain if they were lovers. It was normal. The intimacy was self-evident. 2 men raised together, educated together, who grew from boys to warriors side by side. To the Greeks, their closeness wasn't scandalous. It was almost heroic, like Achilles and Patroclus, the mythical pair they were often compared to. Achilles was the greatest warrior of myth. Patroclus, his companion so dear that Achilles' rage over his death burned down Troy itself. And Alexander? He didn't just admire Achilles, he worshipped him. He carried copies of the Iliad into battle, slept with it under his pillow, and even visited Troy to visit his hero's tomb. If Alexander's empire was built on strategy and ambition, its emotional core was Hephaestion. In many ways, Hephaestion wasn't just another general. He was the constant in Alexander's life. They grew up together in Pella, tutored by Aristotle, and played in the same training yards. They were real best friends from the very beginning. When Alexander became king, Hephaestion was always at his side, not just on the battlefield, but in the council chambers, at the banquets, and even the quiet private moments behind closed doors. One story tells of the Persian royal family's surrender after Alexander defeated King Darius. The Persian queen, first seeing Hephaestion, mistakenly bowed to him, thinking he was Alexander. When corrected, she apologized in terror. But Alexander's response? He laughed and said, "You weren't wrong. Hephaestion is also Alexander." And then came 324 BCE. They were in Ecbatana, in modern-day Iran, celebrating a festival. By then, Alexander was at the height of his power, ruler of the largest empire the world had ever seen. But in the middle of this triumph, disaster struck. Hephaestion fell ill. Some say it was fever, others food poisoning. Either way, within days, he was dead. Alexander was inconsolable. Witnesses wrote that he collapsed over Hephaestion's body, sobbing uncontrollably. He refused food, refused sleep. He cut his hair short, a sign of deep mourning, just as Achilles had done for Patroclus. He executed the doctor who failed to save him. He banned music in the empire. He even sent to the oracle of Siwa, demanding that Hephaestion be worshipped as a god. The funeral was unlike anything the ancient world had ever seen. A massive pyre was built. Stories say it cost more than some entire cities. Soldiers marched in mourning, banners lowered, trumpets silent. To the world, Hephaestion was a general. But to Alexander, he was something far more. And from that moment on, something in Alexander changed. His conquest slowed, his drinking worsened, and within a year, the conqueror himself would be dead. Yes, after the death of Hephaestion, Alexander's personal world was shattered, but his political world kept moving. As I said earlier, in the ancient world, a king's marriages weren't about love. They were about power, alliances, and legitimacy, and Alexander understood this better than anyone. He was then married 3 times. His first and most famous wife was Roxana, a Bactrian princess. Their meeting was almost cinematic. After conquering her homeland in 327 BCE, Alexander attended a banquet where Roxana danced for the victors. Struck by her beauty, and perhaps seeking to unite his new Eastern subjects, he married her. Unlike his other marriages, this union may have had genuine affection. Ancient writers describe her as his beloved, and she would later bear him his only legitimate son. But Roxana's role was also strategic. By marrying into the local nobility, Alexander sent a message: I am not just a conqueror. I am your king too. It was part of his larger vision to blend Greek and Persian cultures into a single empire, a vision that shocked many of his Macedonian soldiers, who saw Persian customs as barbaric. Then, in 324 BCE, not long after Hephaestion's death, Alexander staged one of the most audacious political spectacles in ancient history, the mass wedding at Susa. In one ceremony, he married 2 Persian princesses, Statura, the daughter of Darius III, and Perisides, daughter of another Persian king, while arranging marriages between 80 of his officers and Persian noblewomen. Again, to Alexander, this wasn't personal. It was policy, a symbolic merging of East and West. By binding Macedonian and Persian elites through marriage, he hoped to secure loyalty and create a unified ruling class. But for many of his men, the gesture felt forced, even humiliating. Some would later abandon their Persian wives as soon as Alexander died. What's interesting, though, is that none of Alexander's marriages, not even to Roxana, seem to have been as powerful as the bond he shared with Hephaestion. Ancient sources barely mention emotional intimacy in these relationships. They were simply, in many ways, political moves. So, was Alexander the Great gay? It's a question modern audiences keep asking. But in Alexander's time, no one would have framed it that way. As I said, ancient Greece didn't divide love into gay or straight. But in my opinion, yeah, he had relationships with men and women, but his strongest one was undeniably with Hephaestion. Now, his legacy, after this new marriage, having now 3 wives, Alexander returned to Babylon, the heart of his empire, to plan what came next. He dreamed of expanding even further, conquering Arabia, perhaps even pushing west toward Carthage and Rome. But those plans would never unfold. At the height of preparations, during a banquet, Alexander fell ill. Ancient sources disagree on the cause. Some say fever, others poison. But over the course of several agonizing days, the world's greatest conqueror weakened, unable to speak, yet fully aware of what was happening. As he lay dying, his generals asked him who should inherit his empire. His legendary reply? To the strongest. Those 3 words would turn his empire upside down. And so, Alexander the Great died at just 32 years old, leaving behind no clear heir. Roxana was pregnant with his child, the boy who would be known as Alexander IV. But the generals couldn't agree on who should rule in the meantime. The result was chaos. The empire shattered almost overnight. Alexander's greatest lieutenants, Ptolemy, Seleucus, Antigonus, and others, carved the territories into personal kingdoms. Egypt went to Ptolemy, founding the dynasty that would end with Cleopatra. The Seleucids took Persia and Mesopotamia. Greece and Macedonia fell into decades of civil war. The dream of a united empire died with its creator. Roxana, left vulnerable with an infant heir, was imprisoned and later murdered by rivals. Alexander IV, the son of the greatest conqueror in history, would never sit on the throne. His bloodline, and with it, any chance of restoring Alexander's dream, ended in assassination. In the centuries that followed, Alexander's image transformed into legend. To some, he was a god, a flawless warrior king. To others, he was a warning, proof that ambition without restraint leads only to chaos. I hope you enjoyed my take on this childhood question. If you did, please hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments. What other question did you have as a kid that you'd like me to answer to?